And we're live. Hello, everybody.
Lovely. What a good
Hello,
time.
welcome to the first in a long line of Marvel Cinematic Universe recap live streams. I'm joined by the lovely Ibby and the beautiful James.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Wonderful, beautiful. That's us. Good.
Yeah.
What a good time.
And we're going to be discussing all of the Marvel films up until Infinity War comes out every Saturday, 2 films at a time.
Woohoo! Yay!
Yay!
Go Marvel. 10 years in the running. 10 years in a couple weeks. What a good
That
time.
is actually mad.
I'm gonna be real. It's gone for me from age 8 up until age 18. This is literally my childhood. Like this is flat out everything in my teenage years.
Oh my god!
Honestly,
this movie coming out is a big one for me. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna cry. Hopefully, and I may not cry, but I highly doubt that. So
I've just accepted I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
Like, I will be sobbing on the floor during it, and I might have a mild stroke as well.
I need them all to die. I need to cry.
Oh,
yeah.
I need to like physically show emotion because that's something I haven't done in a decade.
Fair.
Yeah. So I'll just go over the idea of this project, I suppose. In the build-up to Infinity War, I thought it'd be nice to rewatch all the films, build all the hype for this new movie, and just sort of look back on the cultural impact that everything's had. Yeah. So we'll watch. It's like a book club, I suppose, but a film club, where we go away over the week and possibly, if we need a refresher course, watch 2 films. And then every Saturday we will critically examine them, the impact and the sort of piece of the puzzle that they've put into this series, and we'll just talk about what they mean to us, I suppose.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So what better way to start than at the beginning with
the beginning.
Iron Man.
Beginning.
Number 1, Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. kicking this off in the most spectacular way.
It's just.
I think we just quickly need to, before we talk about Hulk. Actually, this is an appropriate time to talk about Marvel's casting. They always do a fantastic job. I mean, we'll talk about recasting the Hulk later, I guess. But Robert Downey Jr. was the perfect Tony Stark Iron Man. I am so impressed because Robert Downey Jr. was just kind of coming out of a slump at this point, wasn't he? Had he just been to rehab
or prison and rehab?
Yeah.
Just got out of prison and stuff.
He'd been out of this. This was the first movie I think he did after that, wasn't it?
Something.
It must have
one of.
No, but they nearly went with all your big Hollywood names, like
Tom Cruise.
None of which I can currently remember because I hate the mainstream.
I genuinely nearly went with Tom Cruise and Sam Rockwell.
Yeah, no, it's Tom Cruise. Yeah.
Can you imagine Tom Cruise? Oh, just thinking about that hurts me.
And so you had imagine being Marvel at this point and thinking, right, we've got X-Men, we've got Spider-Man, kind of got Fantastic Four, and even Ghost Rider are being made by these other companies.
Mm-hmm.
And Daredevil.
I forget Daredevil and Blade.
But yeah, Blade, genuinely. And even at that point, Batman Begins, I believe, had come out. And
yeah.
And so Marvel Studios just established themselves. Marvel Comics had just come out of bankruptcy, or near bankruptcy or something, and they want to join in. And they don't have any of their big players. As I've just said, the X-Men, Spider-Man, Wolverine, the Hulk, everyone is with other people, and so they've got to dive into what they have. And they pick a really interesting hero. They pick Iron Man, who, whilst he's always been sort of narratively up there, he's always sort of led the Avengers, he's been involved, no one really liked him at that point. He had a rough patch during the 90s, and around about 2005, when the Civil War comic came out, everyone started to dislike him. Just as a character, not a solid choice to make a movie on. And they cast Robert Downey Jr., as we've just said, drugs, prison, a not very good movie career in general. They get Jon Favreau to direct it, and they don't have a fully functional script.
Yeah, I was going to say most of that film was ad-libbed and improvised on the spot, wasn't it? Which I think only adds to what a fantastic film this is.
Yeah.
Because all the most sort of profitable heroes that they had, they were forced to sell off, as you were saying, like Spider-Man and the X-Men. Like, they really... I think it's incredible just what they've done. I really do. I'm so... Continue. It's good.
So, yeah, it's a mad prospect to get this film together and go, look, this is what we're leading with. And somehow it worked. So, how old were we all when this film came out?
What year was this?
2008.
This was 2008.
Okay. Well, I was 9, probably. And I didn't see it until after the Avengers, because I didn't start watching them all until I saw that movie, and I went back afterwards. But this was the first one I saw after the Avengers.
Sure. I was 8 years old.
Go on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. So I didn't watch it in cinemas because I was 8 years old, but I'm positive that I watched it coming out. I must have had it on DVD or something. I remember actually seeing more in Sainsbury's. That's it, Sainsbury's. And I remember thinking, wow, what a cool, because obviously they had the Mark I suit that he made in the prison. He had the test flight one, the silver one, the War Machine Easter egg essentially, and then the proper red one. And I remember thinking, wow, this is so cool. I don't know whether that was sort of I think that's really where the appeal for Iron Man as a film came from, is that Tony Stark was a cool guy. He listened to AC/DC and all that sort of rock. And made these cool, gadgety, techy, I think in terms of phones and apps on your phone and sort of, just in terms of what was happening socially with technology. I think, YouTube was starting to be a thing at this point. A tech-based, charismatic, I don't want to say meme hero, he was a comedic character, and I think that's exactly when technology and comedy was sort of, I don't say, it was kicking off, but I think there was a real sort of market for it.
There's certainly a rise in the idea of the personality.
Yeah. For me, a lot of the appeal of this film is the personality, because for me, watching films where the characters don't have a lot of personality or a lot of it is symbolic, I find it very difficult to connect with those characters. And I find humor to be a really great way of integrating, which is why I'm so interested in how they ad-libbed a lot of this and how they continue to do that. But Robert Downey Jr. was such a charismatic choice, and I think it worked really well in terms of making him appealing to a wide audience, I suppose.
Especially,
it's really.
Go on, James.
So go on, Greg.
Okay.
Greg. Go on.
Especially how he played off the other characters. So Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts, Jon Favreau sort of cameoing, I guess, as Happy Hogan, and what's his face as Jim Rhodes, the non-Don Cheadle guy.
Oh, yeah. I have his name written down. Hang on.
No, I'm all about Don Cheadle. I love Don Cheadle.
Terrence Howard, thank you. And obviously with Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane, having all of these characters and all of these personality-based, charismatic actors who play off was definitely something that helped this movie. Even in because a lot of this was sort of less about the superhero narrative and more about the guy in the garage building a suit and redeeming himself, coming out of his old life, going into his new one, which definitely mirrored Robert Downey Jr. So he played that really.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so a lot of these scenes, for example, the one where he's in the garage taking off the suit and Pepper walks in and he says, let's be honest, this is the worst thing you've caught me doing. Scenes like that are what made this film.
Yeah, I just love the scenes and the dialogue so much in this film. It's just so good, and like, so you really feel the relationships between each character. And yeah, I really liked his relationship with Pepper. I felt like she has, like, you know, a lot of personality, and you can see, you know, they're kind of playing off each other as well in the scenes, and it's really interesting.
Absolutely. I was going to mention something. Oh, it'll come back to me. James, do you have anything else about this?
I sort of want to move on the conversation. Still in that relation, is that going to cause an issue for you, Greg?
No, go on. Bring it where you want.
In terms of, you know, you guys are talking about how he relates to characters. In terms of how he relates to the other films, this is actually an issue that DC had. Is when you're making your first film, cinematic universe, the entire, obviously, different films need to have different tones, or maybe they don't. Point is, the different films like to have different tones. When you're making a cinematic universe from one film, the tone you have in that film really branches out into. Only recently, really, have they tried to stray from that and to make the films more interesting. Like Thor Ragnarok was just off the wall, Taika Waititi comedy. Loved it, but in terms of the whole technology-based thing, the whole humor-based thing, the teal and orange sort of aesthetic, this very sort of metal-y look, was absolutely carried across into the next, you know, sort of next at least half a dozen films. And I think looking back on it, we go, wow, they were quite similar and boring. But back then, it served well in terms of Batman Begins. The appeal of that film is that it was a very real Batman after having the really campy sort of, you know, rubbish that was Batman and Robin and Batman Forever. Batman Begins was a very real approach to a superhero movie. And you had Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, which were all very campy and sweet and 1960s based. Iron Man did the same thing that Batman Begins did and just went, right, okay, here is Iron Man modern day. I think that has absolutely helped the Marvel Cinematic Universe full stop, and also hindered it as well, actually.
The decision, sort of point that forces that, is the decision to change it from the Vietnam War to the Afghanistan War. With his origin story, because the character was created around the time of the Vietnam War, he was firmly in that time period. And to move him into modern day and to move his story into terrorism rather than sort of, I guess, McCarthyism.
Yeah.
It definitely cements the cohesive modern Marvel style that we see throughout Phase 1 and most of Phase 2.
I would add to that the choice to make Jarvis an AI rather than a butler, as in the comics, is so good. And it's just like such a clever way to have updated things. And I think that, like, in terms of comparing it with Batman, I don't want to do that too much. But Iron Man and Batman are two very sort of similar characters in terms of their stereotypes.
The rich billionaire with the butler, yeah.
It's impossible to ignore that The Dark Knight came out that year.
Yeah. And I think that just the tone is so different. And I really, as I've said, I really like the humor aspect. I find it a lot easier to relate to, like, Iron Man as a character and care about him than I do about Batman, because he's just kind of looming in the darkness.
We good.
But yeah, using technology, really good.
Definitely. And if we talk about the villain, Jeff Bridges, Obadiah Stane / Ironmonger, he kicked off what has now become sort of tired, but at the time was easily a very compelling villain, the Dark Mirror version.
Yeah.
And it was helped that he was played by Jeff Bridges, because, as we were talking about earlier, this movie is insanely quotable with, you know, the famous line, Tony Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps.
Yeah.
And having him be a Dark Mirror villain, what's the final fight wasn't perhaps that interesting, especially in comparison with more modern ones. At the time, it was wonderfully cohesive. with the callback to the icing problem.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of obviously like metaphors and how you structure a film. And I think, as you were saying, like the dark mirror version, or like, you know, this is the person you could be, but you made the right choices, so you're not, is an absolutely wonderful way to write a film and whatever. But it's, I think with superheroes specifically, when you have costumes and special abilities, it becomes pretty tired pretty quickly when you see, you know, the Venom effect, which is just the evil Spider-Man, or the evil Iron Man, or the evil Black Panther. Like, it's when it comes to superhero films, it's a very dangerous narrative arc to go down, I think. And I think for the first Iron Man film, it can be excused because it's the first Iron Man film. But you know, yeah. In an isolated thing, I think it's fine. But I think when you're building a cinematic universe, you have to be cautious of that kind of repetitive crap.
I would also say that I really like the choice to have Stain as the villain, in terms of him being Tony's mentor and him being like family to him. And that is a theme that has really stayed with the MCU and who they've chosen for their more compelling villains, in that they've always been kind of related together. So you do get that relationship dynamic at the same time, which works really well for a first film, I think.
I was thinking about this recently. I watched a video where someone discussed what makes... They essentially were comparing Killmonger to Hela, and how they're very similar villains. The problem is, with Killmonger, there were a lot of scenes where he was just talking to T'Challa without fighting, and there was still conflict involved. Yeah. But with Hela, they only ever talked in battle. And during the more downtime scenes, it was on Sakaar, and it was great, it was funny, but Hela wasn't involved. And so while they were both really good villains, Killmonger had more time to shine, and he was more woven into the narrative. And we definitely see this with Stain.
Again, I can talk endlessly about why I love Black Panther, and I'm sure we'll do that in the final week before Infinity War.
Oh,
whoa! But yeah, no, actually, that exact discussion will be the video, won't it? Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther. So we'll say
this is going to be the best one.
But no, I completely, entirely agree. I love Black Panther. Anyway, yeah, it's a good time. I think, actually, I mean, we'll link it to the Hulk. The Hulk does the same thing. I mean, the Hulk was a reboot of 2000. It was a reboot sequel, was it?
Oh no, don't remind me.
Annalise the Hulk, or just Hulk, I think it was titled, which was a very weird
Hulk and then the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah. So essentially, it was a reboot because it ditched old characters, it ditched the narrative and the continuity, which at the time was barely even considered a thing. But what it did was it realized that 5 years isn't that long to just redo the origin story, because even the Spider-Man films, as much as we make fun of them for constantly rebooting, we went from Spider-Man 3 to The Amazing Spider-Man, not Spider-Man to The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, no.
And so they ditched the origin. They summed it up in the opening credits so that they could make any changes they needed to. For example, the fact that General Ross got weaponry from Stark Industries, and that the science project they were working on was actually a super soldier project involved with S.H.I.E.L.D. They just put those changes in and then got on with the story, which I thought was a really good choice, to be honest.
No, I was just meaning in terms of the villains. Hulk does exactly the same thing, where it's just like, oh, it's an evil version of the Hulk, and I think it's just disappointing. But I think in some ways, this is why, I mean, apart from like rights issues with Universal, and no, it's not the rights to the character, it's the publishing rights, distribution rights, that's it. They have an issue with, as opposed to like the X-Men rights. But apart from that, like, you can't really do a Hulk film in terms of the way Hulk as a character works. Is very different. It's very difficult for him to hold a narrative. You know, everyone wanted Planet Hulk and World War Hulk, and we've kind of managed to get that through Thor Ragnarok. But Hulk as a first person to tell a story through is it's difficult, it's hard, and both the Hulk movies are basically just him running away from the government, and it's like, it's boring, it's dull. Which is why, you know,
I think Hulk
doesn't want to think about
bold choice for a first one, because they did have the rights to things like Captain America, and Captain America is arguably the, you know, the main place to start, really.
Yeah,
which is why, if you're going to go chronologically, which is interesting they didn't actually. But in terms of the Hulk movies, like, they're just not very compelling, and so it was kind of a risk, but it didn't really pay off for me personally. Watching it, I just don't enjoy it.
I would say it's a really interesting movie because it's got its really good qualities. It's just let down by like an equal number of things, so it's like 5 out of 10 logically. It's not boring, it's not actively bad, you just sort of sit through it.
For me, it's just not as good as the others, I think.
Yeah.
And that plays into the order that I watched them in. Because it was like the last one I watched after I'd seen Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Avengers. I saw it last and I was just like, oh, this is not what I was expecting from this character.
I think it's a shame, because I think there's a lot of potential with the Hulk as like a concept, maybe not as a character in practice, but in terms of, obviously in terms of making producing a blockbuster movie, you've got a big green nerve ending that smashes things. Like, you know, you can do lots of special effects and blowing up and, you know, fun action with that. But then you've also got Bruce Banner and this kind of mental health sort of insanity, like whether is it bipolar disorder, is it multiple personality disorder? You can the point is there's a lot to explore with Bruce Banner and his struggle. And I think, I mean, they actually touch on it in a deleted scene in Thor Ragnarok, which I thought was really, really nice. Shame it got deleted, but I just feel there's a lot of opportunity with the Hulk, but there's just never any sort of. It's difficult to write a blockbuster series with that kind of complex but almost 2D character, perhaps. I'm not sure what it is.
I think it's because Hulk is like a character in terms of how we see him in the movies. The Hulk itself is quite 2D, because in this one, him and Bruce are like the same guy, whereas in the comics there's like a distinction and eventually they split off and there's a whole thing. But like Bruce is very like 3D, but for me Hulk is much less. So you don't get the same, you just get him like smashing things, and it's not I don't know, it's like just watching anything.
There are 2 avenues you could go down with this, and then I'll go on to the chat and anything we can get from there, and then I'll bring on a guest. So with the Hulk, what I realized when rewatching this film was, one, you can work him in an ensemble cast.
Yes.
So he really works in the Avengers, he really works in Thor Ragnarok, and what makes him work in the Planet Hulk storyline is that he has his team with him.
Yes, completely.
People to play off. The other option, and also if you make him more intelligent, which Planet Hulk definitely did, and Thor Ragnarok did, he's just becomes more 3D by virtue of having dialogue, right? But the other option you could go down is having a horror movie. We sort of see this in The Incredible Hulk, because of course, with the Hulk being based on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein's monster, you can definitely go down the route of Bruce Banner being afraid of the Hulk, and if you shoot your movie in a way that frames the Hulk as not quite a villain but a force to be reckoned with, then it becomes a lot more powerful. The first Hulk scene in this movie, in the warehouse, when the government's tracking him down and the Brazilian people are fighting Bruce. There's easily a great tension that you can notice with this double avenue of stress, and then when the Hulk appears, he's in shadow, he's destroying things, we never get to see him, so it really does work. But then by the end of the movie, where he's the hero and he's just fighting the bad guy, it starts to break down.
I would be very interested in a horror-style Hulk movie, especially in terms of like framing him as more of an anti-hero, which could open up more anti-hero solo movies for the MCU. But at the same time, I don't think they could have opened a new movie series with a film that frames your main protagonist as an antagonist.
Yeah, I think
to me they made a really risky choice in choosing Hulk, and then they couldn't follow through with it.
I think it's absolutely a genre issue. It's definitely a producing issue on behalf of Marvel or Universal or whatever. I don't know what else to add. Now I'm trying to work through my head. Just keep talking. Go for it.
We all just try and remember the last time we saw this movie.
Yeah. Also, James, is there any way you can do like a push to talk option or anything, just to kind of mute this echo a bit? Just look into that while I read.
I will see it. Hang on.
Mute it while we have a think.
We have Jules saying, I believe the chat will be available post live stream to watch if you're watching this afterwards. But we have Jules saying, opinions on Edward Norton as the Hulk.
No. They did Edward Norton the dirty so bad with this movie.
Right.
He did not deserve this. Okay, for me, his acting is kind of, I don't know, I can see him as the Hulk, but again, this might be because I saw Mark Ruffalo first as the Hulk, and his portrayal for me is like 100 times better, because I feel like we were talking about mental illness, and I feel like the way Mark Ruffalo has handled it is in the very way of the Hulk being a mental illness. And it's much more like, I don't know, I feel for him a lot more than I did for Edward Norton. And I wasn't really that, into his portrayal. But
I actually saw Edward Norton at first as the Hulk. I must have seen the Hulk the year it came out. It's a standout point in my childhood, the Hulk movie. Especially that scene where he, is sort of, where he's in the glass like tunnel and he sort of bulks out against the glass.
Yeah.
That is like a standout point in my brain. So Edward Norton has always been like the Hulk for me. But I don't know. I don't hate him. I don't dislike him. I know. I prefer Mark Ruffalo because of like everything he does for the world. But I do feel Mark Ruffalo is given a bit more of a performance. I think Edward Norton was just kind of hired for the movie and did the movie, whereas Mark Ruffalo is kind of just, as you were saying with the whole sort of mental illness, I feel he's framed it in a better way. He's given it more depth. I don't know. I don't hate Edward Norton. I think
where he's like holding the scepter is just amazing.
Yes.
So much more. That completely convinced me. I was like, oh yeah, okay. I relate to this guy. I understand him. I understand his treatment of this. Whereas Edward Norton didn't have the same kind of awkwardness that I guess I expect from Bruce. Just generally.
Absolute introversion. Mark Ruffalo brought to it. That Norton had. I appreciated Norton's sort of curious scientist aspect, and the fact that he was quite enthusiastic about his life prior to being the Hulk. That due to whatever reason, Ruffalo just hasn't shown. He just is afraid more than longing for the past. But also, Norton does have that kind of. I know he's quite muscular in this movie, but he is a little bit weedy in terms of the way he presents himself, which, physically, Norton was quite good, I believe.
I agree, actually. I noticed that I was watching Thor Ragnarok. I thought Mark Ruffalo, for me, just kind of feels like Mark Ruffalo. He doesn't really feel like... I remember watching the Avengers Assemble cartoon, and they presented Bruce Banner as this very weedy guy. He had like a mullet, I think, and he wore sort of greasy baseball caps and hoodies. Yeah. And I feel Edward Norton captured that far more. I mean, they probably were based on each other. That's how cartoons based on a movie work. But I mean, it wasn't based on a movie, but you get what I'm saying.
Around about the same time, the creative team.
Synergy. Yeah. But I do feel Mark Ruffalo, maybe it's because I've seen Mark Ruffalo in a lab coat more often, but I feel Mark Ruffalo feels more like a scientist. He feels more like the Bruce Banner with 7 PhDs, as opposed to.
And
So
I feel that's definitely due to the fact that post Avengers, Bruce is less just on the run. He assumedly lives in Avengers Tower, and the government aren't after him because he's an Avenger, etc.
Yeah.
But and this is a very nerdy reference, so I'll keep it brief. He feels more like Hank McCoy, the X-Men's Beast.
Yes, no,
Oh,
I agree.
yeah.
I completely agree. It's the curly hair as well.
Yeah. I can see like them playing each other, weirdly enough, like Nicholas Hoult and oh god, that's changed my life.
Right, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have our first guest. I'm about to bring him unmuted and invisibled. We have my good friend Zaid to talk about pretty much anything he wants to talk about. So here he is. Let's hope he can. Let's hope he's unmuted.
Welcome.
Zaid, try and unmute yourself. We were having this issue before.
It's going so well.
Okay, I think you need to be unmuted. Right, hang up and then rejoin again. That's what happened for me.
This is good. I know how to do this.
In this brief interlude, I'll just remind everyone to drink some water, have a good, good time. Make sure you get some sleep, and we'll give it round 2.
He's still muted. Zaid, do it once more.
Third time lucky, guys. Come on.
Oh dear.
Prayer circle, everyone.
Pray.
Yeah, drink plenty of. I need to refill this at some point, honestly.
I might take a water break to get some water.
Oh, here we go.
Hello?
Hey!
Yeah, okay. Oh, it's me. I'm here. Yeah, that took a while.
Welcome, Zaid.
I'm still figuring out some details about live streaming.
Yes, clearly. Yeah, right. The Hulk.
Go for it.
Oh, boy. So, right, me and my flatmate Mike, who I assume Greg's going to be grabbing at some point.
Yeah,
should I send him
at some point?
Yeah, I'll send him the link if you want. We watched the movie together, and my God, was it a painful experience. So Edward Norton, you think he'd be perfect for it, right? I mean, Fight Club, he does the whole, split personality thing quite well, the whole, being a bit mad. But then it comes to the fact that Bruce Banner is just kind of boring, right? He's kind of lacking compared to other Marvel heroes. Like, he's just a nerd, and not in the same way that Tony Stark is, where Tony Stark's an interesting nerd. Bruce Banner is just a nerd who gets angry and green. And the angry and green part is just it's meh at best. There's a few good things, but I mean, the one thing that I think Emma agrees that drags this movie down is just some of the strange choices for acting. Like Betty, of Betty.
Just don't want to think about it.
Whisper quietly into the microphone, please.
See, why is she doing an ASMR video in this movie?
ASMR Hulk.
That's what I need in my life now.
There's got to be that somewhere, I swear.
Actually, ASMR Thor is what I need, so...
ASMR, that probably exists. I'm not going to lie to you, that probably exists somewhere.
But you do raise a good point, because as you did mention in the chat, Zaid, the actress, I can't remember her name, she isn't a whisper actress.
There's a bit in Lord of the Rings where she yells at a river and the horses come out and kill orcs.
Oh, of course!
Oh, yeah.
Oh, an even star, isn't she?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She can definitely act. She screams in Elvish.
Yeah.
Everything seems to go wrong in this movie. I don't know what's up with it.
There's a scene in The Incredible Hulk, which I can't explain, but they get in a taxi, and the taxi driver thinks he's in the movie Taxi Driver or something. And he's just going through the streets like a madman. And they get out, because like Bruce is trying to control his heart rate. And they get out of the taxi, and Betty screams at the taxi driver. Bruce tries to calm her down, and she screams at him. And it's a brilliant moment of characterization that is nowhere else in the film.
Honestly, I mean, I was sort of cringing. I didn't find it too brilliant because it just felt really, how Marvel's quite good with the quips usually. That felt like a really that moment in Black Panther where they go, "What are those?" and everyone sort of either cringed or laughed. I think it was one of those moments.
Yeah.
And
Okay, I'm just going to come out and say it. I thought that was brilliant. I didn't think it was funny. I just was glad that they put it in. I thought that was in character with Shuri.
I was like so pleased they chose to exclude that out of like the 2 hours content they got rid of. They were like, oh yeah, we need to see where she references a vine.
Movies, man. What are we even doing? But it's just like Betty is supposed to be this great character it's supposed to ground Bruce, but all she does is just sort of stand there on the side, whisper a little, and just sort of act like a bit of a damsel in distress that's not really in too much distress. Because she's entirely calm and doing an ASMR video, as you say.
There's no dynamics. There's no sort of narrative levels in the story. It's just the Hulk and the fight at the end, like narratively. And they could have done, as you were saying with Betty, they could have. I mean, there's a romance story, but there's not. You know, that's just the most sort of tacked on.
It's not a romance story because the romance story's already happened.
Yeah, like it's not
getting back together.
We don't see any of that.
Yeah,
I don't get any romantic vibe between the two of them. I look at them and I go, "Oh yeah, you stood together in a cave. Wow," which was a weird scene. Just saying.
There's no romantic build-up, no tension, because they're already together. If we compare this to, and I don't particularly like comparison, but here it's very, very clear. Compare it to the Iron Man movie with Pepper and Tony getting together or sparking that romance. And just Pepper versus Betty as supporting female characters. There's a clear difference.
It's a very active role that Pepper plays, and it's a very active relationship. It's just as much a part of the film as the suit of armor is, and that's not there at all in the Hulk.
I mean, there's a bit in the Hulk where
the obvious upon viewing. It's just not interesting.
They both have kind of caregiver relationships with the male protagonist, but for Betty, she's just very. I don't really remember, to be honest, but she made no impression on me.
There's a bit in the movie where she
doesn't need to be there.
Just told to stand there and watch.
Yeah, she doesn't do anything.
Like Ross just says, no, let us stay there and just watch. And it's like
why?
You're a military general. Why have you just let your daughter stand here as you try and contain the Hulk? It's just silly.
He's asserting his dominance as a man.
Asserting his dominance. Exactly. Watch the Hulk smash things.
No, watch me smash your boyfriend.
Oh, can we just appreciate there is still not been a female-led Marvel. How many are now? Like we come up to 20 or something.
16.
That's gonna change. Miss Marvel. Okay, so Marvel, Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
It's gonna change. It's been a long time coming, and while they've never led one, we've definitely come further than Betty with.
No, of course.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love Valkyrie.
Valkyrie is the love of my life.
She needs
maybe more than Thor. Actually,
no. Solo maybe.
I love both.
I want to see her lead Phase 4. Is what I'm saying. I want her to have a more dominant.
I know. I'd really like to see her lead like an A-Force team.
Oh, the idea of having an A-Force movie is brilliant. But looking at these two original films where we started off, it wasn't that out there. So we've definitely seen
very by the books.
Yeah, and that's very obviously why they didn't want to scare off audiences with the more crazy concepts. We had the hint of War Machine. We had
hint.
Next time,
War Machine. Extract of Obadiah Stane.
We had Samuel Stearns in The Incredible Hulk with the hint of the leader, which clearly they were gunning for a sequel they never got.
Oh my god.
But they were keeping it quite tame, very, very formulaic to just kick things off. So you got the hero, you've got the love interest / caregiver, you've got the father figure. Although interestingly enough, in the Hulk, the father figure was for Betty, and you have the villain, which in Iron Man was the same as the father figure, and in the Hulk was Emil Blonsky. What do we think of Blonsky, aka the Abomination?
On here?
I mean, he was just a British dude. He was a grumpy British man who roided up and roided up some more, and then proceeded to get choked. Yeah. Not killed, mind you. There is still an Abomination somewhere in the Marvel universe in a prison. They want you to forget that he was there.
We never will.
I reckon he'll
Never
be
will.
back. from
Always
Infinity
remember.
War, like Red Skull. Red Skull's coming back from Infinity War. I swear to God, he is.
Oh,
Red
I
Skull's
really
he's gonna ride in on the back of Abomination in Infinity War.
Just like
That was
with the
the first
leader,
image.
by the scruff of the neck.
Yes.
Like, forget about us.
And
We're
other
still
forgotten
alive.
plot lines from
We're the
Marvel.
only ones who haven't been killed off in our debut movie.
But yeah, so Blonsky had, interestingly enough, he was our first ever super soldier. So if we go on like the Easter eggs and all the things that are putting into these films, we see them dropping the hints of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the wider universe, which at the time no one noticed. So we had, I say no one, the general audience didn't notice. So we had in The Incredible Hulk, S.H.I.E.L.D. was like financing or was involved with the super soldier test that created the Hulk and the Abomination. You had obviously the cameo of Tony Stark at the end of The Incredible Hulk, and you had Coulson appearing in Iron Man. And
Did he appear in Iron Man 1?
Yeah, he does.
yes,
He's very prominent, actually. Not hugely, but he's in several important scenes, and he's there at the end.
yeah.
Oh yeah, no, he is because yeah,
he helps out Pepper.
Yeah.
In the final fight, and he's just Pepper.
And in the cover story as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting his interactions are mostly with Pepper, actually.
Yeah, it's a very sort of
It
predominant.
says something about her more active role in this movie than Betty's.
Yeah.
It's just very side boring.
Yeah, pretty much. And because you mentioned how they could have gone with Captain America first. I think the first Avenger, Captain America first film, is really interesting in how it's woven into the rest of them, because it comes just before the Avengers and it includes elements from its previous film Thor, and also we start to see hints of it with Iron Man 2 and The Incredible Hulk. So in Iron Man 2 we get the mention of the S.H.I.E.L.D. and Howard's sort of Howard Stark's life before during the war, and in the Hulk, Emil Blonsky is a super soldier before he becomes the Abomination, because he goes through 2 surgeries, the first of which turns him into a super soldier, and the second of which he wants to be roided up even further, which turns him into the Abomination. And so during the first fight scene, the first like big fight scene with Hulk on that, what is it, a university campus or something?
Yes.
Blonsky is running really fast, he's punching dudes out, and then he gets kicked in the chest by the Hulk and gets turned into a bloody pulp.
Against a tree.
Against the tree.
He is Groot.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see this hint of what a super soldier could be. Because we're supposed to be very impressed. We're supposed to think that is our villain, this super soldier. And then we just see the Hulk take him out. And it's like this funny moment, but it is a very clear power level setting moment. And then, of course, he returns to the Abomination.
But that serum you were mentioning, another thing that me and Mike noted when we watched it was that why aren't they giving every soldier that super soldier serum? Like, if they've cracked it, which is the whole point of the whole Hulk thing and the whole point of Wolverine, the Hulk, Captain America, all of it's for super soldiers. If they've got the serum, why have they just given it to one grumpy British dude?
I believe it's because they needed the data. There's like a subplot about the data, like that USB drive that Bruce swallows.
Right.
I believe they needed the data to make it work properly.
I think they got it to work properly.
So what, they just trialed it on one British dude?
Yes.
Science.
Blonsky took the prototype, I believe, which is what led to like his anger issues, his obsessive issues.
Yes. Apparently. Who would win, one green man or one British boy?
Actually, while we're on this subject of like power levels, in terms of the Hulk,
I thought we were going to say memes, but
no. Well, we can come back to memes if you like. But in terms of like how the Hulk is powered, do we think that in this movie we really see that the more angry he becomes, the more powerful he becomes, or is that not really evident? Because for me, that wasn't particularly obvious.
I think
because I was talking about this with someone in the wake of Thor Ragnarok. Because
right.
I feel like you can see it more there.
Yeah. I think it's hinted at in the final fight, because the Hulk starts to lose and then he has that second wind moment, which is just a standard narrative thing. But the second wind definitely comes from the idea of I believe it's that Betty's in danger.
Yep.
And so whilst it could easily be attributed to the general, oh no, the love interest in danger, the hero finds the resolve to fight.
Betty ex machina.
Yeah, basically. Interestingly enough, you do mention Ragnarok. I wanted to point out there's a beautiful parallel. So in Thor Ragnarok, we all remember the wonderful scene on the Rainbow Bridge where Bruce jumps out of the spaceship.
Oh my god, I love it so
Oh yeah, that's
stunning.
quite...
Yeah, and then turns into the Hulk, and it's like, haha, they just undercut that dramatic moment.
Yeah.
It's not a parody. It's a shot-for-shot recreation from The Incredible Hulk.
Yep.
What?
Yes, exactly
I
the
do
same.
not remember this whatsoever.
It's not a funny scene in that movie. It's actually, oh no, he's gonna die now because he's taken the serum out of himself. But instead, they cured the Hulk venom, right? They cured it, didn't they?
They didn't cure him. I was discussing this with Emma when I was rewatching it. So what they did during this film, the entire point was they're trying to find a cure, but they instead find essentially an off switch. So it's an antidote that he takes to stop a transformation, and they think it's a cure, but it instead is just an off switch. And so when the Abomination is running rampage in Harlem, Bruce and Betty are in this helicopter. And Betty's like, I think we've cured you. You can't go in and fight. You might just die. And Bruce is like, no, I have to try this. And he's like, he's giving in to his bad qualities for the greater good, standard hero thing. And then he jumps out of the helicopter. And it's this moment where you think the parachuteless descent is going to trigger the Hulk. And then he looks like right at the camera and just goes, oh, shit, and crashes. And then it cuts pretty quickly to the impact site where the Hulk's fist punches out. And it's a really heroic moment in that one.
Oh, I do remember this.
Yeah.
In Ragnarok, it's limp Banner on the Rainbow Road.
Which, no, come on. Banner's now dead. Come on.
Banner is gone.
If he ever turns back into Bruce Banner, which, spoiler, he does in Infinity War, Banner should be dead. I'm saying it now.
I was pretty convinced by this movie that Banner was dead. I was like, he's gone now. We've had a whole tribute to him. Bye. Someone's already dead.
And away with the most boring element of the Hulk.
No, it's the most misused part of the Hulk. I'm a strong believer that you can do something so interesting with Bruce Banner.
Sure. That's with this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde potentially are.
Cool. It just has a genre twist. It's just the way that
if
doesn't
they
work.
did the Hulk in a completely different light, if they did not make the Hulk as a superhero blockbuster movie, I reckon they could have made something really special.
If this was a Netflix original, this would definitely be like a horror kind of,
What if they Loganed it?
They Loganed it. Yeah, you could have done something like that. Where it's more about...
Yeah, but not to start off the franchise.
To,
oh, yeah, of course.
But if they redid it, I don't know, they could just reshoot the whole thing with Mark Ruffalo and be like, yeah, this is the
real one.
This is what really happened.
Tell you something one thing I did like about the movie, because Marvel's had this tendency of just relying very heavily on CGI, and sometimes it does Black Panther, Guardians 2, Thor Ragnarok, all CGI heavy. There's not a single real location in any of them.
Mm-hmm.
And upon rewatching Guardians 2, there are certain scenes where it's like, yeah, this looks like a really, really cheap green screen. But expensive but cheap, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a thing about Hulk is that at least that first scene in Brazil, they actually shot it in Brazil. And I think partially.
It's a rarity nowadays, though, isn't it?
And then there are bits of it that it looked very nice. It didn't look like a CGI'd film. I actually used one, which it was props where it's due, and a few pretty aerial shots as well. Which probably would.
If there's one thing I do want to give this movie, it's definitely just failed potential because it's really well shot. There's a lot of clever camera stuff. If you pay attention to some of the cuts, some of the actual just cinematography, it's really nice. The narrative itself is fairly strong as not quite origin story. The beats are good. If you were plotting this movie out just on a page, it would look good. The problem is the acting is, through maybe no fault of the actor's own, just subpar, which lets down the good camera stuff. And the script, the dialogue in particular, is bland and empty, well, hollow, which lets down the narrative of the thing.
I think that sums up the whole movie. Is it's just hollow. It just feels like a placeholder of, well, how are we gonna make a movie about a green smashy guy?
One green smashy boy.
One green smashy boy versus
who would win?
Marvel
the green
Studios
smashy boy.
production scriptwriter. No, failed potential. I think. Let's flip it back to Iron Man. Do we consider Iron Man failed potential, or like an absolute gem? Like what is it that we like about Iron Man in comparison to Hulk?
I think, aside from the surprise success story that we discussed earlier, I think the main force that drives Iron Man to be so beloved is that it's just solid. There is no dangling plot thread except from the kind of things that they were going for in the future, like the War Machine stuff. There's no... It just feels like it could stand on its own and be not even a superhero movie. If you removed the fact that it's an Iron Man movie and just made it a movie about a guy who makes an invention, it really works. And the characters, as we previously mentioned, it functions as a nice foil to the Hulk, in that the Hulk had a nice narrative, a strong narrative with failed character. Iron Man has a simple narrative with strong character, which makes the sort of plot twist of Obadiah Stane being the villain work, because
I mean, it wasn't much of a twist, because
there's no one else who could be the villain. Who else?
Also, the trailer for that movie gave away everything.
It's really predictable and by the numbers, but because you actually care about the characters, you don't care that it's kind of dull.
I think a really easy way to tell, obviously you can break it down to sort of these specifics, but I feel you can very often feel a movie. You can feel very literally if a movie is solid or if it's hollow. And I think that's the big dividing factor between the two, is that Iron Man has a heart.
I like that.
Whilst, the Hulk doesn't.
For me, the characters in Hulk are just not like compelling enough for me to care about them. The plot is a bit too convoluted, really.
Yeah,
and I just don't care about it because I don't care about the characters.
The plot of that movie is literally Bruce is running away from the military. Bruce is running away from the military. Bruce is still running away from the military.
Oh, and then the plot twist where he runs away from the military.
And the plot twist where he runs away from the military, but then he turns around and fights the villain, and then the military chase him again, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
That's the entire movie. And nothing much really changes.
Why did I think it was really complicated when it's just really simple and boring?
Because it's really simple and boring. However, the kind of
it is bad.
They pepper it in with motivation. So Emil Blonsky has, I think, some decent motivation in that he thinks he's going in on a regular mission to take down some rogue guy, and then he sees the Hulk and he becomes obsessed with taking him down. And then when he gets the steroids, he's then obsessed with power, which leads him to do all that. And that's where it gets complicated, because you have these characters who you don't care that much about, weaving together this motivation that isn't firmly established. Because Samuel Stern is the one to give Blonsky the juice that turns him into the abomination. And Samuel Stern's motivation is that he sums it up in a line of dialogue, to be fair. He's curious but never cautious, and so that's why he cares about the Hulk. That's why he wants to do these experiments despite the obvious dangers. But because the characters don't pop off the screen, you don't follow the complicated motivation that goes into the simple plot.
There's a weird bit where the Abomination dude is staring into a mirror, and he's like, you see from like the perspective of outside the mirror that he's built like a fucking brick shithouse, and he's massive. But then when he looks at himself in the mirror, he sees this like decrepit, aging, like tiny man. And imagine they were trying to go for this whole, oh, seeing the Hulk has made him feel insecure, but it didn't really work because it just sort of was a scene of him being sweaty in front of a mirror. And then he comes out and they say, "You're right," and he goes, "Yeah, I never heard of that." It's like, "Are you? You just had a mental breakdown in front of a mirror. What's going on here? Where's this plotline going? What's going on?"
So, what do we've sort of discussed these two movies to death. What about the impact that you think they had? Oh, also, we've got another guest, Michael. Welcome, Mike. Feel free to jump in at any time.
Am I live already?
You're already live.
Yeah, you're live.
Oh, fantastic. Hi guys, how are we doing?
Well, good, thanks. How about you?
To the party. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Sorry, Firefox does not like Google Hangouts. I'll tell you that for free.
That's okay.
I've installed the plugin like 30 times.
Mike is also through my wall. I can knock here and he'll probably hear it. Hear that, Mike?
No, sorry, I've jumped in. What I don't want to interrupt.
So the current topic that I just moved on to is the impact that these two films had on both culture and on us as people.
Oh yeah, the Hulk was really impactful on culture. Yeah, Hulk's like the mainstay of the Western canon by now. I'm still waiting for that novel version.
Things for white people, if I'm honest. The whole
indeed, Green Lives Matter. Zaid did an excellent rendition of my summary of the Hulk movie we watched the other day. It's just such a. It's interesting you said earlier, Greg, about it having a more of a complex narrative, but I got to say, I think the opposite. It's I mean, because sorry, I forget your name. Is it James? Is that your?
That's me. Hello.
You said earlier about the fact that you don't think Hulk can really hold up a film by itself. I fully agree. I think that Hulk, at least in the way Marvel are doing it, I think Hulk needs to be the sort of. He needs to be like like in the Sherlock novels, how they're not really actually from Sherlock's point of view, they're from Watson's point of view.
Absolutely.
You need Hulk to be the Sherlock element. So you need the main characters need to be your everyman, or they need to be your sort of Captain America's people can relate to. Hulk needs to be a threat, an unpredictable element, as opposed to an element you follow. And if you make a movie about the Hulk, the only thing you can do is he runs away, the army comes. He runs away, the army comes. And they have to contrive reasons to keep Betty in the area. Like, the general's like, keep her here. She can see what a monster he is, or whatever. There is no narrative reason why he would want that to happen.
This is my daughter. I care much about her. Better keep her in a war zone.
Don't put her in the ABC. Don't drive her away. Just leave her near.
Father of the MCU, definitely.
Yeah, indeed.
Jules has made an interesting suggestion in the chat, which is, what if Betty had been the main character?
Probably would have been fine if she wasn't bland as shit.
Get a better actress.
Yeah, she's a good actress. Just given
she's not the best actress.
She's good in Lord of the Rings, at least.
When she's playing an elf, she's great. When she's going to be playing like a scientist lady, she should be a bit more like, I don't know. She's very knowledgeable. She should be finding solutions. The other characters should be looking to her for pragmatic solutions to the issues. Yes, she did. Comic reference. Yeah, not great.
Oh dear. I mean, Iron Man. Whilst Hulk is no cultural impact, Iron Man is. I mean, it did come out at an unfortunate time, as you said before, with it coming out with Batman. So, in the shadow of the Nolan trilogy, you've got this goofy Marvel movie. But I think it did a pretty good job of making us all like him. Like, yeah. I mean, I had a dodgy pirated Indian copy because, of course, I did because I'm scum. But even on my dodgy pirate version, I was like, yeah, Iron Man's awesome, and I'm looking forward to where this is going in terms of.
You guys chatted about the whole arms allegory thing with Iron Man, yeah?
We haven't really gone much onto Iron Man. Tell us more.
Yeah, go for it.
I thought Iron Man is the opposite. I think the Iron Man's got really, really impactful, and not only did it basically reboot the superhero genre, though it could be argued that Blade and X-Men did. I was Iron Man, really. Yeah, it was absolutely Iron Man, like inventor of the post-credit scene. It's super, super influential. But also the fact that it's such an appropriate thing right now, like with conflict in the Middle East, you've got this allegory for disarmament, or rather those who sort of appropriate to have arms. Like it's really, really appropriate right now with
all your
political
Hillary
climate.
Clintons and your Theresa Mays and stuff. Yeah,
Absolutely. yeah. It's strong and stable suits of armor. Yeah, I think Iron Man is the film that we needed at that point, and we need more like that. We need, in my opinion, we need less of Iron Man fighting like sort of the extremists and stuff. Even though the extremist storyline is absolutely brilliant, I think we need less of that, and we need more of the looking at different types of arms, who he sells to and who he allies with. There should be allegories for who he allows to have his technology. Like giving his technology to Rhodes is a really cool thing because it's about his faith in the government. But it should be more down to he should have allies that have maybe slightly sketchy backgrounds and have to make tough moral decisions about who he gives his technology to as an allegory for the West.
No, because one of my favorite things about Iron Man 3, obviously, like the focus was the extremists, whatever. But what I really, I mean, we'll talk about this in another week. But what I actually really like about that film is the whole Mandarin and homegrown terrorism. Like, obviously, comic fans are like, "Oh, that's not what it was like in the comics," and like,
who gives a damn, right?
Yeah, cool. But like, I thought that was genius because how many films that are, Iron Man? How many do they do sort of something that sort of straight up since Iron Man 1? Like,
it'd be like taking the Joker and going, the Joker isn't the Joker. It's actually this dude. He was an actor. Haha.
No, I mean, in terms of taking a villain and making it a political statement with it, like a really blatant homegrown terrorism is the real threat type thing. That I love, and I want to see more of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
What about a personal impact on us? Because we mentioned briefly earlier that James and Ibby hadn't seen the films when they came out. I saw Iron Man in the cinemas.
Oh, wow.
I didn't see The Incredible Hulk because I didn't know it existed in the cinemas. Either the marketing wasn't quite there or something, because I believe it came out a few months after Iron Man. And at the time, I'd been reading comics for about a year. I'd been reading specifically Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, so the big three. And I was, how old would I have been? 11, turning 12 at the time.
Oh, you're so old, Greg.
I know, right?
Oh, great.
And so this comic that I was reading, because it was an Iron Man comic, was hyping up the Iron Man film. So I knew all about it. I went onto forums. The official Iron Man website. Can you remember the time when movies had official websites as markets?
Yes.
Throwback.
The NBA, not NBA, the Space Jam website's still live.
Really?
Isn't it a meme?
Yeah, it's a bit of a meme, but you can go back and see it, and it's
Sorry, I'm
recently
looking this up
reactivated.
right now.
Do this.
But
yeah, so they were really hyping up Iron Man. So I was aware, and I looked on forums. I found out there was a post-credit scene. So I was really annoying for my dad, to be honest, because I forced him to take me to the cinema and then to sit through all the credits.
Dad, I want to watch Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly. Bless him. He took me to see so many nerdy films until I was about 16. But yeah, Iron Man had a massive impact on me because it was something that I'd been watching cartoons. I hadn't seen an Iron Man cartoon, but I'd been watching like Spider-Man, some of the X-Men stuff, and then I'd been reading these comics for about a year. And to see this live action and good, because I had seen Spider-Man 1 and X-Men 2 when I was young, possibly a couple of others, maybe a Superman film. But Iron Man was the first one that was aimed at me, the one that was I felt I could connect to. Because interestingly enough, side note, when I saw Spider-Man for the first time, it was because I'd gone looking, because I'm a nosy bugger, through my dad's video collection, and I just found Spider-Man, and I went,
I could have ended badly.
Yeah, I could have. And I found Spider-Man on VHS, and I'm like, Dad, what's this? Spider-Man's the cartoons. And he went, oh yeah, watch it, why not? But Iron Man was the first one where I connected to it. It was the one that I got excited about. But the Hulk, I had no idea it existed, so I didn't watch it until a few years ago.
Did you have those green Smash gloves? The toys?
No, I never actually got any toys.
Everyone had them.
Oh, mate. Wonderful toys. I remember they tried to do something similar with Iron Man. They sort of had this like disc shooter thing.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just sort of naff, really. I mean, it's not the same as big green things you can beat your brother up with.
No, with the Iron Man toy, they had a helmet that changed your voice, which is great, even though it doesn't really change his voice in the movie. Yeah, yeah, it had like one of those really bad, like lo-fi voice converter things.
Like Ben Affleck, Batman voice converter.
Yeah, it does change his voice in the movie.
No, it does a little bit, but it's
in the first movie, his voice is fairly modulated. Specifically, if you look at the scene around about the middle of the movie where he's taking down the terrorists and protecting the women, the iconic one where the tank blows up, right? His voice is down modulated, but it's in the future films that they dialed that down to where we've basically got no modulation at all right now.
Does he bleed?
What do you prefer?
I understand their reason for not modulating it, and also we have a lot more inside the helmet shots, so that's fine. And also talking on earpieces. We hear the characters talk to each other on earpieces, so I get why they're not doing it. But in scenes where he's just talking to people, I like the modulation. But then again, it wouldn't necessarily make narrative sense because he did it in the first movie to protect his identity. So, perhaps
that's what it is. That's a good observation.
He no longer needs to hide the fact he's Tony Stark because he's telling the world he's Tony Stark.
I am Iron Man.
Yeah.
I'm Iron Man. Please come and blow up my house. This is a good plan.
Yeah, I don't have any defenses or any scanners or any technology of any kind that will
just come around and shoot me.
I better wear my weakest suit of armor too, the one that is, not quite operational at random.
No, I have to apologize, guys, specifically to Greg and Ibby, because earlier on I said I watched the cartoon Avengers Assemble. I just found out that was not the correct cartoon. It was the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Yes.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Wait, which one came out?
That was my big exposure to, that is the Iron Man I saw toys of, a while ago. So, the Hulk I absolutely watched in 2008. I'm pretty sure I watched Iron Man in 2009. But 2010 was like the big sort of Avengers year for me. The big sort of, I'm actually going to invest in this series now. So Iron Man, I think for me personally, which one did I watch first and sort of get the most enjoyment out of, I guess? I mean, the Hulk maybe, because I didn't care about movies back then. But, they're important to me, these films. And Iron Man was the first of those films. So in terms of the personal, which one's the best for you personally, they're both pretty important to me, actually, but obviously Iron Man's better. So,
but can I talk about the terrorists now, man? And how funny and generic they are.
You're the resident expert, Zaid. So yeah, you should
yes, clearly. It was just such a weird, funny choice to have. Well, I mean, it's perfect to have him, as you said, with the political themes and all that stuff. But having him crash land in the desert and having these like sort of shifty, dodgy terrorist guys, sort of like speaking in Pashto and sending this, we have captured Iron Man, all this stuff. But then the other scientist dude in the cave with him, what's his name? What's the name of the scientist guy? Jensen, yes. He is brilliant. Like as a character to give motivation to Tony and sort of like, the whole changing the world by building the suit of armor yourself and his little sacrifice. And something I noticed is both Iron Man and Captain America have this strange parallel where they have these elderly mentors who just inexplicably die shortly after they get their powers. The Cap with that German dude and Jensen in Iron Man. And it's funny, their parting words that they give each hero literally define the characters. Because I think Jensen's final words are like to do with protecting everyone and that's like something you see with Iron Man throughout, and it's gone in Civil War. Civil War's so good.
I mean, that's why he makes Ultron, and it's his defining thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to look at those final words. Last words in Marvel Cinematic Universe media.
Why is there a wiki page for this?
I don't know.
What?
Jensen is speaking to Tony Stark while dying from gunshot wounds. Don't waste it. Don't waste your life. After a speech on what you just said.
Yes.
Aww.
Don't waste your life, Greg. That's even your, what are you doing with your life, Greg? It's 200109, and you're talking about movies that were like 10 years old?
Yeah. If I find the Incredible Hulk, it might give me
Cancer.
Gamma radiation.
Gamma
I
radiation.
was
I
gonna
can't
say,
believe they
Gamma
killed Stan
radiation.
Lee. He's Rip. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, they killed
Stan Lee's the
Stan-
guy who gets the bottle with the blood in it, and he
Oh
dies.
yeah, also that.
Rip, honestly,
Second Marvel movie with Kill Stanley.
he was too young to die.
So yeah, what about like these two heroes? Because James, you talked about Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the cartoon, which I would heavily recommend
What a
to
cartoon.
anyone.
Is that the one we watched, Greg?
Yes.
Oh yeah, good cartoon. Good.
So
cartoon.
it's kind of low production values, but it really gets the characters, and it nails some of the storylines as well. It does Secret Invasion really well.
It does.
Is it as good as Young
Yeah.
Justice?
Not as good as Young Justice, but sort of in a.
Young
Nothing's as
Justice
good
is-
as Young Justice.
But
Yeah,
still
yeah.
I
very
love
solid.
Young Justice.
I thought Young Justice was
Did
good.
it,
Sorry,
did it
not
get
the-
season 3 in the end?
It's yeah, Netflix have got it now, and they're
Amazon.
scaling. Is it Amazon? Okay,
Yeah.
one of the VOD services has got it, and they're scaling the content based on like what they expected viewer ages are. So now it's going to be, it's the rating above the ones it was before. So it's going to be a bit darker and stuff. They might get Red Hood in. Anyway, I don't
Oh,
wanna
yes,
sidetrack,
go
but
for it.
yeah.
But yeah, so Mike and Zaid, what do these sort of characters mean to you, I guess, with Tony and with Bruce, maybe even some of the side characters? Moving on, now we're in 2018, how have these characters sort of impacted things, do you reckon?
So let's start with the Hulk. So the Hulk to me as a kid was really cool. Like I don't know what it was about this.
Of course, you'd like the Hulk.
What are you trying to say, Mike? No, because as a kid I was like, oh, he's big, he's green, he smashes stuff. Awesome. That fight scene with Abomination, I was like, yes, beat the crap out of him, do it. But then upon rewatching,
Do it!
Yes, do it. Upon rewatching as an adult, I'm like, what did I see in this movie? It's just two green men punching each other for about the last third of the movie. It's just two green men punching each other with not
Man of Steel.
One of them was
without
brown.
Green.
what?
The Abomination
Man
was
of
brown.
Steel.
No, he wasn't. Was he brown?
He's a yellowy brown.
I'm a yellowy brown.
I just conflate BVS Doomsday with Abomination. They look unfathomably similar.
They
Oh,
really
yeah.
with the bones
And the
and
quality
everything.
of the CG is also like identical, even though they're like 6 years apart.
It's dreadful.
I reckon if Superman have tried to choke Doomsday. wouldn't have
Yeah.
happened.
No, we got that in Man of Steel with Zod. It's fine.
Oh, okay. No, Greg, that's breaking of one's neck.
Sorry, Greg,
Go back to Zod's broken neck.
your question. Sorry, your question was about the characters of Banner and Stark and how they've.
Yeah, or the side characters if you have attachments to
Yeah.
them.
So
Gotta say, Betty Ross, it just is completely changed.
compelling female role model.
Influential.
She changed my life, truly.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, so and Bruce is pretty cool. My main issue, and I brought this up with Zabe when we were watching the Hulk movie, was so Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a huge part of the Western canon. We're not a huge part of it, but it's everyone knows about it. But the intriguing part of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is that Hyde is also an intelligent character, and they have conflicting agendas. So you got one entity who has two conflicting agendas, kind of like, spoiler alert, in Fight Club. That makes the narrative so interesting. The issue with Banner and the Hulk, his Mr. Hyde, even though it can talk in the comics and talk later in the Thor Ragnarok and that kind of stuff, its agenda, not only does it not conflict, it doesn't really exist. The Hulk only really wants to break stuff and doesn't seem to have much of a goal behind, besides sort of like showing off or like violence and that kind of stuff, which I think, I don't know. I know this is kind of a critique of the Hulk character in general, but I think that Bruce Banner is an interesting character in himself. He's idealistic and he's conflicted and yada yada, but then the Hulk doesn't really change that. It's not as if like the Hulk really I don't know, like he doesn't have to battle against the Hulk, he has to battle against turning into the Hulk, and I think there's a significant difference there.
I like that.
I believe this is where, because the other character from Western canon that comes into the Hulk is Frankenstein's monster, and Frankenstein's monster is primarily about youth and innocence and the way that babies have two modes, giggling and crying, and that when something's going wrong for them, they just throw a tantrum and they smash things. And so we see Frankenstein's monster on its journey go from this absolute youth and just breaking things when things go wrong for it to becoming more educated and learning its place in the universe. And if we combine this with Jekyll and Hyde idea, we see the Hulk starting to represent Bruce's instincts, Bruce's unfiltered, childlike emotions. And we see this briefly in this movie with the scene that Ibby mentioned, where he takes Betty to the cave. After he saves her life from the explosion, he takes her to the cave and there's a storm going on. And Bruce is like the Hulk's calming down. He's about to step back into Bruce, but then lightning strikes like far within distance, and the thunder scares Bruce, and he stands up to it, and in this really pretty shot, yells at the sky and protects Betty.
Hulk smash lightning.
Yeah, and she has
Protects Betty from what? Oh,
Lightning.
the lightning.
his perceived threat. The idea is that the Hulk, and this is why the scene doesn't quite work. What you just said is that the idea is he's just been scared by a threat that doesn't exist. He is a baby. It's like, when your dog, if you've got a dog, when your dog barks at the cars driving past the window. It's that idea that he's really childlike and he still has Bruce's core values at heart.
But why does that enrich Bruce's character, though? Because, like, Mr. Hyde forces Dr. Jekyll to change the way he acts to counteract Mr. Hyde's agenda. But how does the Hulk wanting to protect Betty from lightning change the way Bruce acts?
Exactly.
Because Bruce is already in love with her.
Yeah, exactly. Because they both care about her. It would be better if the Hulk was a massive, imminent, mortal threat to Betty. That way, Bruce would have to play around that element. Whereas, to be honest, he's better off turning into the Hulk sometimes because the Hulk will just protect Betty.
There's actually that scene where the Hulk is holding Betty in a fire and just sort of like cradling her. And it's like the safest place she could be is with the Hulk right now.
Yeah.
Again, this
So
is
that's
part of
kind
the
of a
reason
threat.
it could work better as a horror is if we saw the Hulk actually hurt Betty in some way, and we saw Bruce like fighting against that. And you can bring in a lot of themes into that.
Yeah, like guilt, like Bruce would feel, even though it's
domestic violence.
Yeah, absolutely. That
This
could
would
be
work so well as a Netflix original. Someone do this, please.
Someone call up Kareem Zreik from the Punisher team.
Yeah.
And
give him this task.
Oh dear. Make Hulk good.
Make Hulk smash again.
You make
What's up? Should I go grab an Anzac Bicky?
my Anzac Bickies? How dare you?
Yeah.
Go and grab an Anzac Bicky.
So this is a good opportunity. Thank you for your time, Zaid. I'm going to rotate things and bring in another guest.
Oh.
So do you have any... I know, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Do you have any final thoughts on Iron Man and the Hulk and where they moved forward?
Well, I mean, the Hulk, it's just bad. And I'm glad that they use the Avengers as sort of a Hulk movie kind of on the side. And Iron Man is just it's a perfect thing, and let's try and forget Iron Man 2 ever occurred. I know Mickey Rourke was trying to forget it occurred. I too want to forget it.
Wait, is next week's Thor and Iron Man 2?
Next week we're going to be discussing Thor and Iron Man 2. So...
Captain America and Avengers at the same time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh gosh.
Oh gosh, that's going to be an intense time.
Indeed. Greg, Microsoft getting a Bicky, so he's going to return to find me missing.
That's fine. I'll explain that.
Explain that
We'll tell him I've got him a new.
The Hulk came. Scared of lightning. And it dragged me away.
Took you to Brazil.
To Brazil, of all places. Why does he keep going to Brazil and India? What the fuck is he doing?
He doesn't like white people, that's why.
The Hulk doesn't like white people. Oh dear.
The Hulk is racist.
Back on?
Hello.
Yeah, welcome back, Mike. We're just going to exchange Zaid for Jules.
No.
So, yeah, I know.
Goodbye.
See you around, Zaid. Thank you.
Zaid.
Thank you. Lovely having you on.
I love you. I love you guys. Bye. Bye-bye. You're going to get rid of me now. That was meant to be the timing.
Get rid of him.
You do it. You just close the window.
I thought you were supposed to. Okay, bye.
Oh, dear.
If I need to bugger off as well, just tell me when I've outstayed my welcome, and you
Cool.
can pull the ejector seat.
So, yeah, what else sort of is there to delve into with these films? Should we go on?
Quickly, when we talk about Thor, I would like to talk about Betty and Jane as two female scientists.
Yeah,
go into that.
All right.
That's an interesting
and talk about their roles as love interests.
We got a comment from, I believe, Miriam. I'm just scrolling up to find it.
The group chat now want to talk about shipping, so
yeah,
we are doing that 100%.
How do I access the group chat on this app?
If you go into the actual live stream as it's playing on my channel, then the chat will pop up on there.
Forte bene.
You can pop it out so you can see this at the same time.
Yeah,
awesome.
I sound like I know things.
Here we go. Found it. Miriam criticizes the idea of having a scientist lady character as a supporting secondary role, and I suppose you could class Pepper in that as well because she kind of is the secretary / she runs the company. And she says they're cop-outs, like you're trying to say you're woke enough to make a female romantic lead not technically useless.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's this kind of, oh yeah, she's not a damsel in distress. Look, we're progressive.
She can do science. She did math one time, guys. She was useful to the plot. I'm so fucking done. Sorry. I'm really glad. Can I just say now, I'm really glad Jane is not in Thor Ragnarok.
Oh, me too.
Improved that movie 1000%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, welcome, Jules.
Hello.
Hello, Jules.
Hello, Jules. Welcome.
Good to have an American representation on this chat because these are American.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So do you want to give your brief overthoughts on both movies, I guess? Because we haven't heard from you.
I have not seen The Incredible Hulk.
Nice.
For the best.
I have not seen that one.
Probably best to keep it that way, if I'm honest. So.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether I watched Iron Man or The Avengers first, but I watched them in the same sort of brief period. I think what it was everyone on Tumblr was talking about The Avengers, and I was like, I guess I have to see this, so I should probably see all the ones that came before it. I didn't really know that The Incredible Hulk existed. So
that's entirely fair.
Jules, you're just telling my origin story. Thank you.
I watched Iron Man and Thor and Captain America, and I think Iron Man 2, and then I went into theaters and watched The Avengers, and I think that's what happened.
Cool. So what do you think of the characters as characters in the movies and as just cultural icons?
I think Tony Stark is like super interesting. I just don't think he's my type of character. Like, I'm just not like a fan of the smarmy asshole white dude.
Sure.
And I know that there's like more to him than that, but just like the way that I'm not a big fan of his, but I do like respect and appreciate him as a character, and I think that he's really interesting. I don't know, he's just not my type of guy. Bruce Banner is more my type of guy.
Nerdy.
Yeah.
See, I think Tony is nerdy in like a really cool way, whereas like Bruce is just nerdy in this nerdy way, where he's like normal.
Yeah.
And Tony is very much like a Hollywood sort of guy. You know, he reminds me a lot of other Hollywood heroes. Just I can see this movie just standing on its own outside of the MCU.
Yeah. So yeah, Jules, you mentioned that you sort of prefer Bruce, and yet you didn't see the Hulk. What do you think about Mark Ruffalo's Bruce in these future movies? Do you reckon he could maybe have his own standalone film?
I honestly don't really know. I think that if they gave him to the right director and the right writer, I think they can make a movie out of anything if they have the right director and the right writer, you know. But I think that it's a very tricky thing, because I agree with the idea that having a Hulk movie works best if the Hulk is not the main character. Just because it's like that whole idea of like Watson is the lead character in Sherlock Holmes and all that. But yeah, I completely lost my train of thought there. I'm going to do that a lot if I'm on these.
It's fine. There's a lot to discuss. How do you feel sort of the people around you in your life possibly feel about these characters? Because I know that in my youth, I was sort of the whole tragic white dude story of, I was bullied for enjoying nerdy things and now they're cool. But definitely, I would go in shops, buy the Iron Man comic, and people would laugh at me. And now you can't go 10 minutes without seeing a YouTube video discussing Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah. No.
So how do you feel the people around you maybe think about these characters before or after the movies?
I think So here's the thing. I don't have many friends.
Aw.
But I have a lot of Tumblr friends.
You have friends with us.
Yeah. But on Tumblr, I remember back in the Avengers heyday, just seeing every other post that was on my dashboard was the Avengers, you know? And it was like those like different clips and gift sets and like some shippy stuff, but not. I didn't really follow a lot of really shippy people. But I guess I feel like all of the people who I am close to have. Okay, wait. I do have one friend who's really into the MCU. Her name is Sarah. She's not watching this, I can assure you. But Sarah is super into the MCU and especially into Black Widow and Hawkeye, and them as a ship.
Weren't we all in 2012?
Yeah.
What year is this?
Rest in peace. Thanks for that, Age of Ultron. Still not happy about that.
Age of Ultron did not need a romantic subplot. Just
Oh my god, I hate Bruce Nat. I hate it.
I can't look at it. It makes me so
Interesting,
angry.
and we'll talk about that in that live stream because I have thoughts.
Same. We're gonna fight. I can feel it.
But yeah, I think that most of the people I know who are invested in the MCU aren't invested in the lead characters, if that makes sense. Like,
That's interesting.
I've seen a lot of people on Tumblr now talking about like Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther, which makes sense because they're apparently very good movies. I have not seen either of them yet. I'm ashamed of myself.
You have a wonderful time ahead of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's glorious.
Yeah. But like, people aren't talking about like Thor as a character. They're talking about Valkyrie and like, they're talking about like Taika Waititi and like being attracted to him, which is something I share.
Yes, man, I love him.
What does Taika Waititi look like?
Do you know who's someone who is talking about Thor? This woman.
We can't stop you from talking about Thor and his arms.
I think I've mentioned him about 6 times already, and it's not even that live stream yet.
But yeah, I didn't even know that Doctor Strange came out because nobody on Tumblr was talking about it.
What?
I have seen
When
no
did it
gifts
come
of
about?
Doctor Strange. So it very much my exposure to the MCU is like what I choose to watch, like the movies that I choose to watch, which is like that brief period when I like watched all the MCU movies, and then like I've watched some of them as they've come out. I haven't watched all of them. And like what I see people reblog on Tumblr, and I don't know. I just don't see. I remember people talking a lot about the heroes back then in the Avengers era, but I don't really see it that much anymore, and I think that's interesting.
What I find very interesting in terms of reception of the MCU is it's now become very genre based. So if you're into like certain parts of it, so you're into the political kind of Captain America stuff, you always end up like in a group of people who only are interested in that, where there are people who are like mainly into Guardians and Thor stuff, like me, and then there's people who are like very into like Iron Man or like certain ships, but certain ships tend to like push your interest into certain directions. So like I know nothing about Doctor Strange and I don't care to, frankly. But yes, it can be very like genre concentrated.
Yeah.
There's like a big split in what you see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think definitely one thing that has made Black Panther and Thor Ragnarok stand out is just like the fact that I haven't seen them, but from what I can tell, they seem very refreshing to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
They were different.
Yeah.
They were different, is what they were. But
Yeah.
actually, I mean, basically every movie since Captain America: Civil War has made an effort to be different and interesting.
Arguably, you can throw Ant-Man in there because they went with the whole heist comedy aspect, but it was still quite funny.
I think if they kept Edgar Wright on as the director, I would agree with you more.
There is a parallel world where the Ant-Man movie that Edgar Wright was making came out in 2005, because I think that's when it was meant to come out.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah,
Thinking about that is upsetting.
And it's just because also it wouldn't have been an MCU film; it would have been standalone.
Yeah,
he did not. That's the reason he left the project, because he didn't want his characters in his mind to be used in other films and to have his vision tainted and blah blah blah. So
His vision for Ant-Man.
Because you can sorry, we'll say that for the Ant-Man video, but I completely, they're very different, the new ones.
Oh, Rebecca in the chat is saying that Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther, they get a lot of audience outside of people who regularly see MCU movies. So because they have a wider appeal, and I don't think you need to know anything about what happens in these films.
Black Panther
before
Black Panther
appeals
and
actually just due to the representation, and that's such a monumental film, and it only helps that it's well done. People are just interested and excited.
You can get by on Ragnarok with the cultural context. You don't need to see the previous films, but the discussions that we've had, because we live in a cultural climate that is inescapable from the MCU. So you go into Ragnarok just hearing what other people have to say.
Yeah.
All you have to know is that, Hulk is the Hulk, and Thor is Thor, and that is, seeing them go head to head, and you don't have to see anything before that.
I took my mum to see both of them. Well, I say took, I mean she took me and paid for it. That's why I went with her, so I could see it for the third time. But she knows nothing about these movies beside what I've said, or hearing me chatter about my various interests within it. And she really enjoyed both of them, and she was like, yeah, I felt like I understood what was going on. So
that's really good to hear.
They are definitely a callback to the original Iron Man movie for me, because that's a standalone.
Does anyone else have any sort of family stories with regard to, because I know that my mum, I think, would have watched a cartoon from the 60s or something. She's vaguely aware of these characters, more so Superman and Wonder Woman. She definitely watched Linda Carter's Wonder Woman. But my dad was not aware of any of this, and he took me to every MCU film aside from the Hulk in phase 1. So now he's got this idea, and now the pair of them go off and watch the majority of the films as they come out.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure my dad took me to see Avengers. I don't remember, but if I was young enough that I would not have been allowed to see a movie by myself. I need to check. What year did Avengers come out?
2012.
2012.
Okay, I was 13. I was probably old enough to see it by myself, so I honestly don't remember. But yeah, my dad always he's a very old school nerd, but even older school than old school, where he didn't read comics. The comics he read were Peanuts comics, So yeah, I've played a game sometimes with my dad where I name a person in the MCU, and he has to tell me what their superhero name is, and he fails every time. I don't even know why we play that game anymore.
Yeah, there's no way in heck basically any of my family members would pass that. My mum and dad think Iron Man and the Iron Giant are the same character. And my brother just hasn't seen any Marvel film ever.
No, my brother's the same. My brother hates it so much.
Ready to watch Ready Player One then. They are right in there with that movie.
Yeah, and they'll love it. Yeah, all the pop culture references. They'll get the DeLorean, but then they're going to be like, Tracer? Who the hell's that?
Okay,
so yeah, it's not
here's
gonna
the
work.
story. I go to a women's college in the United States. The other day in my film class I was taking, someone brought up Ready Player One, and the entire room groaned. No, I remember why. It was because we were talking about movies in which someone goes into a virtual reality, and so my teacher was showing trailers for different movies, and she was showing a trailer for Tron, and then she showed a trailer for The Matrix, and then she showed a trailer for Ready Player One, and as soon as people saw what it was, everyone was like, ah.
I actually used the trailer for Iron Man as part of this media studies presentation I had to do years ago, and my whole project was about it as a cultural movie. And I was like, oh, here are some interesting shots, because it is really interesting, camera work wise and CGI stuff. I was just like, this is a cool movie. So yeah. Also, I would like to talk at some point about Tumblr and the MCU,
Go for it. This
Can
I do that now?
Well, sorry, I don't mean to derail, but just in case there's any time sensitivity with regard to my activity on the stream, do you mind if I quickly drag it back to Iron Man and the Hulk?
Yeah, that's why I said at some point.
Yeah.
Go for it.
And I don't know whether you guys have already been over this or whether this would be too boring and wanky, but going down to into the technical elements of it, to discuss the two films in comparison with each other. If you guys are up for that, I don't know whether you guys.
Tell your opinions loudly.
So I recently watched, as I said with Zed, I recently watched Hulk. I think the second one's called Hulk, isn't it? It's not called Incredible Hulk. Yeah. And I found that the editing is actually really awful in comparison to Iron Man's editing, despite the fact that it's actually like a younger film. So Iron Man's editing is basically flawless, which is really, really awesome. The pacing is absolutely brilliant. And the way that they blend, because obviously the CG is so funny. I don't know if you guys have seen the on-set photos, but Robert Downey Jr. wears like a sort of like a chassis thing of the Iron Man suit, but then just walks around with regular trousers. He looks hilarious. But they basically pioneered that style of doing things. And I think it looks better in Iron Man 1 than it pretty much has in any other film that's had Iron Man in it. Because sometimes, like if you watch Civil War, you can see a little bit that they got the rig on. Whereas in Iron Man 1, I think it looks great. Even when he's like half sort of disassembling the suit and stuff, it looks brilliant.
Something else,
I just feel Marvel have kind of got a little sloppy with their CGI recently. They've kind of just...
I think that's entirely because they're doing 3 movies a year.
Yeah, just money. Maybe it's just money, but at least it's not X-Men Apocalypse, so we're absolutely fine.
Do not. Literally triggered me.
Something minor about the Iron Man suit was in the first movie they paid a lot more attention to damage than in newer movies, and maybe that's because they want to show that the newer suits are better and can take more hits. But something that's you may notice in video games, if you've played the Batman Arkham games, over the course of those games, his suit takes damage and it feels better. Even if it doesn't necessarily look more real, it just feels more believable. And so in the first Iron Man movie, when he's in whatever country he goes to take out the terrorists mid-movie, you see all the scuff marks and the kind of bullet whatevers. And it just feels more metal. You could... the texture of the Iron Man suit is far more real. Whereas if you look at, say, the Infinity War suit or the Spider-Man Homecoming suit, nothing ever happens to it. And so you don't know what it would feel like.
In terms of my suspension of disbelief for these movies, this is definitely one of the most grounded in reality ones for me. I mean, the Hulk, I haven't seen it recently enough to really comment on how much damage he takes, but then he's like live.
Well, I mean,
he's not really.
He grows into a big hulking green monster. That's not quite as grounded as, like,
the Abomination is fine.
In terms of that sort of believability in CGI, it's primitive CGI, and primitive being obviously relative to whatever you're talking about. It's not like the Hulk Lou Ferrigno's TV Hulk.
One or something.
Yeah. But the Abomination has these kind of bones sticking out on his spine and his elbows and stuff, like Doomsday and Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
And just those little touches, especially when the Hulk breaks one of those bones off. Even though the CGI isn't that great, it's the kind of texture of the world that makes it more believable.
Yeah, for me, these movies are very grounded in reality, whereas it seems we increasingly divulge from that as time goes forward. And that is, I mean, we do end up in outer space and stuff.
Yeah, so it's getting more comic booky.
More and more further out. So this is why, for me, these films really work as an entrance, especially Iron Man. Like, you are slowly drawn into this world and you believe it. Then you see the next movie, and then you see the next movie, and slowly, suddenly, you've got aliens invading from space.
Yeah, but it is funny though, because when we were watching Hulk, you know, in like the later Avengers films or the TV universe, they're like, "Oh, have you been in New York since the incident? The incident happened." And of course, they're referencing the Chitauri. But then you've got to think, hold on, 2 enormous monolithic green beasts just smashed an entire city block. Like, isn't that the incident?
Not just the city block.
The Avengers.
Harlem.
I read Harlem, and I'm like, where is Harlem broken?
Exactly.
It's so interesting because not only am I an American, I am from New York City.
Brilliant.
I'm from where the center of the Avengers, like everything is. And so I'm just like, I wonder sometimes, like, if that actually happened, what would actually happen in regards to, like, being a New Yorker. Like, and I haven't seen enough of the Marvel TV shows, like, on Netflix to, like, really see how they deal with people, because, like, those are all in New York City, too. But I haven't seen enough of them to know, like, how they deal with that. But, I don't know, I just find that interesting. Ibby, before we get into Tumblr and the MCU, I have a game I'd like to play with all of you, if that's all right.
Go for it.
Okay.
Oh,
so
go
I
on.
went on Archive of Our Own, went to the MCU tag. First of all, the most recently posted fic is about Stephen Strange and Everett Ross in a domestic setting.
What?
No big deal. No big deal. But I would like all of you to guess what are the top 5 ships in the MCU.
Oh, Ibby's on it.
No cheating.
No, Ibby just wants her favourite ships to be there and will be upset
Okay,
if
so
they're
the
not.
What do
top
you guys
ship.
think of number 1?
Steve and Bucky.
Yeah,
Correct.
Steve and Tony
Yeah, I
will
was
be up
gonna say,
there.
2 is Steve and
Even
Tony.
Tony.
Number 3 will shock you.
Thorky?
No.
Will shock you.
Where
Whiplash.
the fuck is Forky?
Whiplash and his bird.
Yeah.
Number 9, maybe?
Peter and Deadpool.
No.
Black Widow and Hawkeye.
No, they are number 4.
Okay, so number
Bucky
3
and Black
will
Widow.
shock you, which means let's go with not a hero who's frontline. So let's go with Sam Wilson.
No.
Ah,
Why on
Guys,
Disney?
I thought my brain died.
Ned and Peter.
is it a villain?
Too
Tell you
soon.
what number 3 is?
Loki and Tony. No, that's like 2012. Sorry.
Loki and Tony is number 6.
Why
Okay.
is that ahead of Thorky? What the fuck is this fucking time?
Go on, let us know. What is it?
Okay. It's Clint Barton and Phil Coulson.
Oh, I've read stuff in that. Huh.
I don't know either. I don't understand it. It's okay. They're number 3. Clint and Natasha is number 4. Pepper and Tony is 5.
Mm-hmm.
Loki and Tony Stark is number 6. Number 7 is Leo Fitz and Gemma Simmons from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Fair.
Nice.
Number 7 is, for some reason, Bucky and Steve again, but this is with an ampersand instead of a slash.
Ugh.
Number 9 is Loki and Thor, and number 10 is Jane and Thor.
Okay, fair.
I'm disgusted by how close Jane and Thor is to Thor and Loki.
Yeah,
That's upset me
yeah,
on a
no.
fundamental level.
Jane Foster. Not
Not that I ship that or anything. Just to clarify.
Right, so I think it's about time we did a guest switch around. So thank you for your time, Mike.
No worries. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any final thoughts that you want to give?
No.
Okay. Do you have any shameless self-promotion that you want to do?
No, I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook account where I have lots of nice friends.
Tell us who your favourite ship is.
My favorite ship. I think the top 3 ships are the 3 Project Insight ships in Winter Soldier.
I agree.
Enjoy the rest of your chat, guys, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you very much, Mike.
So long,
See you
farewell.
around.
It's been a pleasure.
I would just like to say that Mariam in the chat being like, ew, Jane and Thor is my mood constantly.
Yeah,
Speaking
no,
of
get out of
Miriam,
town, Jane
We're
Foster.
bringing Miriam in so she can join whenever she likes. I've sent her the link.
We are fed up of Jane Foster in this chat. We do not support her.
I
Okay.
like Jane fine.
Fine is my point, but she's not interesting. And also that movie is weird on many levels that I will talk about next week.
It's
Cool.
weird.
Oh, Greg, did I tell you about how I made Arno watch the Avengers with me when he stayed with me?
Oh my god, tell me
And I
more.
ruined it for him by giving him my alternative interpretation, which is where this is actually a movie about everyone trying to get with Loki.
Oh,
And
maybe.
this ruined it for him. And now I think I ruined the whole MCU for him, actually.
Oh, we've just turned it into The Bachelor.
Hmm. Yeah, that's my interpretation of
Oh,
the movie.
oh god, I want to see that so bad. Someone make a parody of like The Bachelor, but it's with Avengers. Please.
This is what we need in life.
Easily a thing.
Somebody.
Oh my god. So, Jules.
Rebecca is telling me that is objectively true. So
That's fine.
Done.
Rebecca, if you want to be on this stream, then do hit me up and I can guest you at some point. Jules, because it's interesting to get your perspective on this because we're we have very different experiences watching these films. If you were to, I guess, go back and watch these films, how do you think you'd feel in comparison with it being 10 years from them being released?
Oh, geez. It's been 10 years. Jeez. Okay. I think that seeing as I am now a film major, I feel like I'd look at them from a lot more of a technical filmmaking level, which is not necessarily like a nostalgia thing, or it's just like how my brain works now. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think that the thing is, after being exposed to just Marvel movie after Marvel movie after Marvel movie, it would be interesting to take a look back at like the first one, like Iron Man, and just to see if it holds up. And I haven't watched it recently. I probably haven't watched it since I first watched it when the Avengers came out. But yeah, I think that I forget who directed Iron Man.
Jon Favreau, known for his work on The Jungle Book, the new one, and Chef.
Ah, interesting. I don't know these screenwriters.
Screenwriters for Iron Man is a difficult one because it didn't really.
Oh yeah, because it was a lot of it was just like improvised and stuff. Yeah,
but
sorry, I get like super into like screenwriters and stuff now.
Yeah, with these early films, they didn't, because as we've seen now with Ryan Coogler, Taika Waititi, James Gunn, they're really going for sort of personality-based directors. But back then, they kind of didn't. Jon Favreau was interesting in that he also then went on to direct Iron Man 2, and that he's also acting in these films, so he feels more connected. I believe he's even an executive producer on the whole MCU. But back then, they didn't really hire directors for their vision. We had, and this is going to be more into the future discussion, but we had the first Thor movie directed by Kenneth Branagh, who is known.
Gilderoy Lockhart. Sorry.
Yeah, who you know as Gilderoy Lockhart, and he was chosen because he is a Shakespearean director, and so they wanted to get that kind of element going in there. And then the director of Captain America: The First Avenger, who's
Joe Johnston.
His previous work was Disney's The Rocketeer, which was another superhero 1950s period piece.
Well, apparently Joe Johnston's going to direct The Silver Chair, The Chronicles of Narnia, has been announced.
Oh, crikey. Well, that's interesting.
Excuse me, they're making another Narnia film.
Can we just do a bunch of live streams on the Narnia series? Because I'm very invested in those.
We can have a proper Narnia discussion at some point, because I have an interesting just life experience with Narnia. But so yeah, when it comes to the sort of personalities behind these movies, they weren't really there at the beginning. And as James mentioned, you can sort of see that with just the movies having no real standout personality, which is definitely by design. But yeah, so what do you think? Perhaps we have Miriam, I believe, joining us at some point. She's figuring things out. We'll see what happens.
I just found an article ranking all 12 MCU directors, which I think there's more than now because this came out in 2017. Let's see what they say. Sorry.
Go for it. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, is to see how these old films are viewed today. Oh, I think Miriam might be here. I'll unmute her and see what she has to say.
They put the director of Thor: The Dark World as the worst, which is fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then
he's the worst something, that's for sure.
It's either Louis or Louis Leterrier. I'm guessing Louis because it sounds French. Who directed Incredible Hulk as number 11. Oh, they put Kenneth Branagh pretty far down.
Yeah, he used a lot of weird techniques with that film as well, I'll say with that. But so yeah, whereabouts is Jon Favreau with Iron Man?
Let me see. He's number 5 out of the 12.
Okay, that's fair. So what do we think with regards to looking back on these films from now, after having two sequels for Iron Man and his
Joss Whedon is number one. Excuse me, I just needed to say that.
Disgusting.
Yeah, what do we think, looking back on these films, how do we think they're viewed today in comparison to the newer ones?
Sorry, what did you say? I was distracted by closing that tab.
How do we feel as a group that these movies are sort of looked back upon critically?
Honestly, I don't think people think about them that much now. Because, like, we have so many Marvel movies that people are just talking about the newest ones. And I don't think that many people are, like, looking at it. Maybe they're, like, video essayists on YouTube and stuff who are looking at this whole thing as a whole. But I don't know. I haven't really heard anyone talk about the original Iron Man in years, you know?
For me, apart from people who include Iron Man, and it tends to be Iron Man, in their list of, like, favourites from the MCU, there's not really a whole lot of discussion of Phase 1 anymore. Like, we've very much moved past that, especially with how successful, like, the Avengers movie was and Winter Soldier was, and, like, there have been standout movies since then that have been very, very strong. And I feel like people just don't really rewatch Phase 1. It's too embedded in reality.
I think from
Are we here, Miriam? Is your technology working?
Can you hear me?
You're breaking up a lot.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Switch to a different laptop. You can hear me?
Talk a bit.
Okay. So I would actually argue differently with the MCU, at least for the general public. So for some background, I got into the MCU as a very casual fan. I got into it not because I was interested in it, because my older sister was super into it. So when I watched Iron Man, like, I didn't even know that there was going to be more movies. But I think for people who are general fans, I do think that people still have nostalgia for the Phase 1 movies, particularly because for Phase 1, people often watched all of Phase 1. At this point, watched a lot of the Marvel movies, but not all of them. And I think for Phase 1, perhaps like the 2 or 3 really stand out for people are the first Iron Man movie and the first Captain America movie.
Yeah, that's true. We definitely look back on, I suppose, those two in particular, because we have fully functioning trilogies. Thor is interesting in that Ragnarok is such a wild departure. It doesn't feel like the third part of anything. It just feels like a different direction. Whereas, look, the Captain America trilogy only got better with time. And by that, I mean that each movie made the previous one better. And Iron Man also had that sort of Iron Man 3's ending was an excellent conclusion to the first Iron Man movie. And so people have more reason to look back on these movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this would be a good opportunity.
I feel like the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I'll just briefly do this. I feel this would be a good opportunity to bring in my next and final guest. So thank you for your time, Jules. You've provided a lot of wonderful, just different opinions and such. So do you have any final thoughts before I send?
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally a bit tired of the MCU. Maybe going to see Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther will change my mind about that. It probably will, just from the way people are talking about it. But I haven't willingly seen an MCU movie in a while. But yeah, I definitely think that from like a film, like these films have been going on for like 10 years now. It's definitely interesting to like take a look back at each and every one of them. And I think it's a really cool thing you're doing, Greg.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Right. I really want people to look at these films and sort of go back and reevaluate what they think and just get excited for Avengers, because 10 years in the making, like that's no small thing. Infinity War isn't just the next Avengers movie. It's the story they've been building towards before Disney bought them. So there's a lot going on here. But yeah, thanks for your time, and I'll do the switch over.
All right, bye.
So, cheers. Miriam, I believe you were going to say something. Ooh, this is audio going on. Are we okay?
Is this fine?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, could you not hear me? I said I don't remember.
That's fine. But yeah, so I'm going to bring on Rebecca as our final guest, and then I'll sort of wrap this up in about 5-10 minutes, because we've been going for pretty much 2 hours now.
Oh, 2 hours looking at your face, horrendous.
I'll check the chat just to see if there's been anything more. Rebecca, hello.
Hello.
Perfect. Rebecca, do you want to give your thoughts on anything that we've discussed?
Please.
Oh man, well, I mean, I've only been here for a little bit. Not a big fan of Kenneth Branagh, but I respect the Lockhart take. The list of ships, deeply upsetting. Though I love that Stephen Bucky is there twice. And yeah, I've seen like a lot of, like, most of my experience of the MCU has been like friends who are more invested, like taking me to movies. So it's been very interesting to see it like differently from people who have perceptions of like the trilogies as a whole and are really invested in that. Like, yeah, was not a big fan of Civil War, but had a really interesting conversation recently with someone who was like viewing it in relation to all of the other movies where like it worked much better than it did as just like a fun movie on its own. Yeah.
So how do you feel about the characters of Tony Stark and Bruce Banner?
Well, I don't know Bruce Banner very well because I've never seen a Hulk movie.
That's fine.
Tony Stark, I was very surprised by how much I liked Iron Man. Oh, wait.
Miriam, hello?
Did you say something?
Okay, I'm going to try to switch devices. You guys just keep going.
We'll just continue.
But yeah, give us something on Tony Stark, Rebecca.
Yeah. I mean, he's the kind of character, like, I watched these movies, like, I watched like the whole trilogy within a couple days, which is fascinating. A couple years ago, I wonder if my opinion would change now. But he's definitely the kind of character I would normally be like, oh, look, a privileged white man. He's so troubled. But also, like, when I watched the movies, I genuinely found him to be a really compelling character. But I feel like I like him more within his own universe than I do in the context of the Avengers as a whole. So that's
really interesting.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
What about let's go with Iron Man as opposed to Tony Stark. How do we feel about Iron Man as a superhero, as an icon?
I feel like the style of Iron Man. Wait, can we hang on? Okay, so I feel like Iron Man's like the way that they've done the armor is really interesting, and it's given. I don't know, I guess we see a lot more like armor now, like bodysuits and stuff. And like even in Black Panther, Shuri has those like blast hand things. And Valkyrie has similar things as well. And those seem very modeled on like the original. In the first film, we see him like designing gauntlet things. And it just reminded me of that quite a lot. And I was just like,
yeah.
But I feel like Iron Man is solid hero.
That's fair. Rebecca?
It's the whole Iron Man setup is really interesting cinematically because it's kind of like a car because you see the suit from the outside, because like there are a lot of superheroes who have suits, but normally you just see the suit off doing the thing. But with Iron Man, you get to see the suit and then you get the weird shots of him like inside the suit. So you have sort of like a disjointed like close-up perspective and like here he is from the outside, which is just like fascinating for cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's definitely an issue that a lot of superhero movies face, which is you want to show the actor's face, but they're wearing masks, and Iron Man got around that in a very clever way. So
I feel like the way they did it has influenced quite a lot of other cinema where they have suits, and so maybe Pacific Rim comes to mind in terms of like having massive suits, and Hulkbuster as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Reminds me of each other.
Pacific Rim is really interesting. I don't know any behind the scenes knowledge on that film, so I don't know where they were drawing inspiration apart from the obvious Japanese Gundam genre.
Yeah.
But just the idea of having Western mech suits is something that is definitely on the rise. Edge of Tomorrow is an interesting. I know it's based on a manga, but the fact that it was made at all is quite interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely more interest in, like, I would actually say the Iron Man way of doing things harkens a little bit back to steampunk for me in terms of how, like, we see all the dials and stuff. I mean, it is very high tech, but it's like a higher tech version of steampunk.
Certainly in the first movie, we saw a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I really liked it.
Yeah, and like all the emphasis that's put in the beginning on like making the suit and like the engineering of it all is very cool. I mean, I love a good like developing the powers plot, and that's a really interesting way of doing it.
One of my sort of weaknesses when it comes to any film, not even necessarily superhero film, just a film about someone who could be iconic or has an iconic weapon or something, like James Bond you could throw in, is just seeing the development of their costume and the items that you go attached to. So Harry Potter, anytime a wand is broken, anything like that, it really does help a film. It's not just a kind of throwaway thing that the nerds will like, but it goes back to sort of Greek mythology with Samson and his hair, and just anything like that. Or Rebecca, what do you think about sort of symbols of heroism?
Well, I also, like, for me, it's very much like the training plot that goes into that. Like, I have this thing where I always like the superhero fantasy movie the most, like, before they get all of their powers.
Right.
Like, while they're developing. Like, I watched Power Rangers.
Nice.
Yes. And, like, I was super, super, super into it until, like, it was just a fight scene, and I was like, oh, neat. But like all the time they were like being angsty teenagers and like trying to figure out what was going on. I was like, this is like a good training montage is really, and I think that especially when it's training to something that you've already seen or like building up to like an image that you know will be there eventually is like especially exciting.
Yeah, and it makes it pay off really well when you know what went into it.
Yeah.
For me, this is part of the reason why the Hulk movie is slightly less compelling, is that we don't see any kind of training, really. We don't see Bruce really gaining control in any way. Just the same thing happens again and again and again. And I'm just like, it would be nice to see, like, he's in Brazil. It would be nice to see him actually trying to gain control of his powers. And just like,
There's a brief montage of him doing, like, breathing exercises.
Yeah, but that's like the equivalent of it takes me to do one breathing exercise. So.
Yeah, like, they paid it lip service.
Or breath service.
Yeah, what do we think of, say, the Hulk as a superhero, as, like, an icon for say kids to get attached to and such and so forth?
I think one thing I like about the Hulk, particularly okay, so for this hangout we're specifically talking about Iron Man and the Hulk, right? As in the movies or the characters?
The movies. The first two.
Then I can't say anything until Thor Ragnarok comes.
That's fair. But yeah, if we are looking at the Hulk, not necessarily Bruce, but the Hulk, the big green guy, as a cultural icon, that, like, you buy the toys, the kids wear the gloves. What do we think of him?
I did have the gloves. I smashed my cousin in the face with them.
Nice.
Oh no. So the Hulk's really interesting because I think he's kind of, I feel like from his inception, now I don't know the comic book history, but like as someone from the general public, when you look at the Hulk, he sort of represents this really toxic masculinity sort of figure. He's very muscular, he's very big, his power comes from his anger and like from violence, right? And I think MCU did a really good job in showing that Bruce Banner is not that person at all. In like further films, you really see that while he's Bruce Banner, there's a lot that he just can't do while everyone else is, participating in all the action. And they also, and this is something that you guys were talking about the live stream earlier, where when he's the Hulk, technically he's not really supposed to have any control and just supposed to be going on rampages. And I do think that like the fact that they he is kind of controlled as the Hulk. You know, you don't see a lot of him actually hurting the people he loves, even though realistically that would happen. Now, while that, like, narratively, I think that's really damaging, when you see it as a role model for children, seeing him where, like, he is technically, you know, his power comes from being angry and violent, but because there's children watching, I think it would be really difficult for him to be a role model if you address that more explicitly.
It's also really interesting, just as, like, wait, sorry, were you still going? The audio is a mess. Okay, great. It's also really interesting narratively, I think, and this is one thing I was really into with Buffy back in the day, but it also applies in like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario, or really any sort of that thing where it's like the person versus this other version of them, where like in pretty much every case you end up with really interesting deconstruction of like where the boundary is exactly, and it's like they want to set it up as like these are completely different entities, but then it starts getting a lot more blurred as they go on. And I haven't seen the first Hulk or like any of the Hulk movies, so I've only really seen him in like an Avengers or Ragnarok context, which might change my perception. But definitely I think it's an interesting place to see like the like, wow, he's so different from this other version of himself kind of get more and more complicated. Yeah.
Mariam did bring up a really interesting point about how you can't have, and this is what I was saying earlier about genre, is you can't have Hulk smashing people he loves because there are children watching, and this is fundamentally, I mean, it's not like a children's series, but it is an all ages series, I would say. Disney, especially now, are very family friendly, hence some things we'll go into later.
Yeah. Specifically,
but him like domestically abusing Betty would be a no.
They specifically didn't give Tony Stark his alcoholism because it would have been pretty bad, especially maybe even for Downey Jr. to go through that again.
I mean, you can read it very clearly but
they did the storyline in Iron Man 2 and peppered it throughout the rest, but they changed the details to make it more family friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that could be a good argument for why maybe there should have been, or there should be, a Hulk trilogy, because if you had a trilogy, and you know how Marvel does try to tweak it, so like these days, like every trilogy has like a slightly different genre.
Yeah.
You could get more into the darkness of Hulk. It would be a bit jarring to see that compared to what Bruce Banner is in the general universe.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to explore it, you would explore it through a trilogy.
That's fair.
Yeah, there is definitely room for a lot of exploration, and I feel like, what someone said earlier about Betty as a main character, I feel like that could also be really interesting. There would be a lot of ways to do this well, and I feel like this movie just didn't get the opportunity it needed. It just comes too soon in the universe for it to work. Like, you could go a lot darker.
Was the first Thor movie? Oh, yeah. Was the first Thor movie? Was that the start of the MCU Phase 1?
No.
What
was the start?
Went Iron Man, and then a few months later was the Hulk, and then nothing, I believe. And then in 2010 we had Iron Man 2, and then in 2011 it was Thor and the First Avenger being Captain America, and then 2012 alone was the Avengers.
That was a good couple of years.
Yeah, right. So that was phase 1 of the Marvel Universe. So interesting enough, that brings us on to sort of how I'm going to conclude this stream, because we have been going for over 2 hours. Next week, we're going to be fully discussing Thor and Iron Man 2. And I think there's some interesting comparisons to draw between them. And also we can obviously bring back Iron Man 2 into the first Iron Man film. So yeah, that's the plan for next week. I'm not sure whether we'll be doing it at the same time as this stream, but it'll be next Saturday. So do we have any sort of final thoughts on these movies and the impact they've had on the world?
Okay, something. Okay, who wants to start?
Go on, Miriam.
Okay, I think for me, one of the biggest impacts Iron Man had, as someone who casually knew nothing about comics, basically,
was that was the first MCU movie, and unlike previous superhero movies I'd seen, aka Spider-Man, that was the first time I saw the main character, firstly being very adult, and secondly being not having a secret identity at the end of the film. So I think that actually has like greatly influenced what it really set the tone for what the rest of the MCU is going to be, because that's sort of one of the big themes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that there are no secret identities. And the superhero aspect of them is directly tied with their like personal lives.
That's a really interesting point to make.
Wow.
It's something we'll surely delve into with films such as Thor and Spider-Man Homecoming. Rebecca, any final thoughts?
That was just so good. I'm just still thinking about it. Sit here and ponder now. Yeah, no final thoughts.
No. Ibby?
Well, for me, this movie, I mean, I saw it after I saw The Avengers, even though it turned out my parents had it on DVD. So I might have seen it beforehand and just not realized. But for me, Iron Man really kind of cemented my interest in the genre. It was very grounding, and I just really enjoyed it. And I didn't see Incredible Hulk until years later, and I wish I hadn't seen it at all.
Entirely fair. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'll be sure to put all social media details in the description, because this stream will be available for future viewing, as will all of the subsequent ones. Afterwards, we'll just have some Google Hangout fun time. So if anyone wants to join in on that, that's chill.
Be our friends, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. See you next week. Watch a good film.
So don't watch Iron Man 2.
Iron Man 2 has
Thor 1.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to hit the stop broadcast button now.